Hi everyone, Selena here from So Small. I thought I would this month do a sew along. I think I said in a previous video I thought about doing a heather sew along. I'll admit sewing that thing up was a nightmare. I'll talk about that in another video. So I thought I'd have another go with a different pattern. I've got one pattern left that I want to sew this month, and that's the Stella Joggers. So I thought this would be a good one to sew along, because for me I have to make quite a few pattern adjustments to adjust for my height. So I thought it'd be a good thing to start with the adjustments I make to the pattern and how we get there, and get you to sew along with me. So hopefully you enjoy this sew along. Okay, to start off, I have already traced out my patterns. So the Stella Joggers is a pattern by Tilly and the Buttons. This pattern is in her second book, and that is this one here. It says Tilly and the Buttons stretch book. So the Stella is a two-part pattern. It's a hoodie. This one you can see she's working on the front, as well as a pair of joggers. Now I'm only going to be sewing up the joggers. So I have taken the pattern pieces. You can see the back leg here in black, and then the front leg is here in blue. Now in order to trace these out, I have actually used the long roll paper from IKEA, this stuff, and then I taped the pattern piece to my patio door here, and then I taped the IKEA paper over the top, and the light coming through the door enabled me to see all the lines I needed to, and I've managed to trace my pattern pieces. So now the adjustments I need to make to my patterns are to do with the height. I am 5'9.5" or 175 centimeters, and the majority of my height is actually in my legs. My legs alone, from the top of my hip joints to my floor, are about 110 centimeters, which is a lot longer than average. My body height is standard, and I don't normally make any adjustments to bodices for dresses, but I have made adjustments to bodices for jumpsuits in order to cater for the leg length. So I've already started out, and I have measured my own body from this point down the inseam of my leg, and the point I want to get it to is 79 centimeters long on me. Now if I measure this out on the pattern, you can see, I'll move this up, this pattern is 69 centimeters, so I'm a good 10 centimeters short. Now I made last year the Tilly and the Buttons Juno pajamas from her third book, Make It Simple, and I did the same adjustment then as what I'm going to do now, and that adjustment is to elongate the leg length by 10 centimeters. Now I have, this pattern comes with a cuff, and I know some of you might say, well, there's no point adding all the length I wanted to in the trousers if I've got a cuff. That will give me some, but I don't want these to be tight trousers. I don't want these to be tight and then a cuff at the bottom. I kind of want a little bit of room to move in them, so I want them a bit loose. So I'm making the main leg piece the length of my legs, and then the cuff bit at the bottom will give me a bit of extra wiggle room. So on your pattern pieces, you should, when you trace them from Tilly and Buttons, you should mark on your grey line arrows, and then this line here is your lengthen shorten line. So what I am now going to do is I'm going to cut along this pattern. So I've got my front leg piece here, and because it's trousers, I need to make sure I do whatever I do to the front, I have to mirror to the back. So I'm going to cut both of these along here. So I'm going to start with the front. So I'm going to cut through this line, and that's now split my pattern pieces into two. So I've got some excess paper here, and I'm going to put my pattern in the middle here, and the middle there, and then I'm going to tape that down. Okay, so you can see here I've now taped the bottom part I cut off my pattern to the bottom of my paper. And I'm now going to measure up. I'm going to start with the grey line. I'm going to measure up 10 centimeters, and I'm going to make a little mark for that there. And I'm going to do the same either end of the pattern piece. and I'm going to draw, I'm going to put all those points back together. So now I know this difference from here to here is the 10 centimetres. That's the added length I need. So then what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw another line from my grain line up to that line. And this now, I now know where to match my grain line up on my new drawn line. And then I'm going to tape that down. So now I need to kind of rejoin the edges of these two patterns, because it's not a case of just going straight there, because that will distort the leg line. We kind of have to now merge it up here. So I go from that point up to the trouser leg and I give myself a new trouser line. So then this is my new front leg with the added extra bit, and then now I will trim off these edges and then stick all the bits down. Okay, so I finished the front piece. I now have my back leg on the table and I'm going to do the same process again. I've already measured around that inseam, and again it's 69 centimetres, so I know I want to have my 10 centimetres extra. So I'm going to cut along these length and shorter lines. So split my piece into two. I'm going to take the bottom leg piece, this, and I'm going to tape it down, just a spare piece of paper in between. Another reason I kind of like this IKEA paper, it is a bit thicker, and I found lately, I don't know about you who watch my wonderful channel, how you feel about patterns. I know quite a few people not necessarily happier with tissue paper patterns these days, especially when you want to make adjustments, because they involve so much turning and moving and pulling apart that the tissue paper is so delicate, whereas something like this, it's got a good sturdiness in order for you to make these adjustments. So as with the front, I'm going to measure up my 10 centimetres. So my ruler has 2 gauges. So I'm putting that on my line, marking 10. I'm going to come over to this edge, make sure it's flat, and then over to that edge. Join these pieces up. And then again, come out perpendicular to my line, my grain line, so I know to match my grain lines up. So now I've got my new T, I'm going to match that up on the line. Tape it down, and then again we're going to follow the new edge line. So I'm kind of going to go up from the edge point here to where it meets the, and then we've extended. So as well as kind of adding length, I've got to gain a little bit of extra width, because for me this will sit at a different point in my leg than it would do on someone slightly shorter. As with the other one, I just did it off camera. I trim down. My excess, and then now I can kind of tape this all together with security. Flip it over. So I can actually get rid of this excess bit of paper. There'll only be more paper to fold away later. There we have one back piece extended by 10 centimetres. I could then put this with my front piece and I can see all my parts are going to match up. So I've got my front piece extended, and then these will go with the waistband for the Stella, pocket bag, and then I have cuffs and then the pocket facing. And those are all the parts I'll need to cut out ready to make my joggers. So that's going to be part 2. Okay, we are back now for cutting out. So I am using this grey sweatshirting. It's lovely, soft, fleecy backed. I've put my right sides together. At the moment, I've just basically placed out my patterns. Now, it's always worth checking in the book or the pattern or whatever you've got, just to double check their recommended lay plans, making sure you've got any pieces that might need to be on the fold, such as the waistband here on the fold, and then working out where we can fit everything else. So I'm lucky enough, again, these are quite wide. This is quite a wide fabric, so I'm able to get most of this on within my length I've got. I'm just going to try and pull out the top of the fabric as far as I can. I'm not one for wasting if I don't have to, but jersey curls. So we are back. We are now up in my sewing room. You can see some of my stash behind me here. I have clipped in all the notches on my pattern already, and I've got my book with the instructions ready to go. Now, instruction 1 talks about stabilising the front pocket. They say to use knit interfacing. I don't have knit interfacing. I haven't ever had knit interfacing, but often, especially with other Tilly projects, I've used ribbon or canvas tape, so I'm going to do the same. Doesn't mean I have to sew it on, but it gives that security, and it's all about making sure that the pocket edge doesn't droop or stretch. So that's what's going to be step 1. So I'm going to get on with that one. Okay, I've sewn on my ribbon. So step 2 is to take the pocket facings and attach them to the front joggers, right sides together like this, and then stitch. So the seam allowance for this pattern is 1.5 centimeters, 15 millimeters, 8.5 inches. So I'm going to get that done on both of these. Okay, now I'm going to understitch my pocket seam line to the pocket facing. Now I'm going to put my legs wrong side up. I've got my now pocket facings pulled down the other side. So that understitching, it's really made that seam nice and flat. Okay. Now I'm going to take my pocket bag and I'm going to place these over my pocket facings, right sides together. I'm going to pin them around the pocket curves, which is this edge here. So I'm just doing this edge bit here. With about the side. So I'm not doing the side seams or the legs. Stitch these pocket curves, not sew through the legs themselves. And then I'll trim my seam allowances. Okay, so I've moved on to the next step and I've done it on one leg already. So I sewed around that edge and I trimmed my seam allowances, and then you pop the whole bag so it's neatly tucked behind the front leg, and then we basted within the seam allowance. So this is done at 1 centimetre from the edge. We baste those in place so that becomes our new front piece. So I'm going to do that now on the next page. Next page on the next piece. And then we have number 2. So I have pockets, both for my legs. Very pleased with them. So I've got to place each front leg on top of its matching back leg. I'm going to put the right sides together and I'm going to pin them along the inside leg. So the inside leg is opposite the pocket and it's the bit from the curve down. I'm going to start making my 2 leg pieces now. There we have front and back all joined on the inner leg. I'm going to leave it there for tonight. It is 5:15, so I need to get tea on. But I'll come back and carry on tomorrow. Hello, back for day 2. So I finished off yesterday, double checked the instructions. So we finished with sewing up the inside seam. I've now pinned and we're going to sew the outside seams, and then we will have 2 attached legs ready to start sewing together in the middle. Okay, so I've got my 2 legs now, so I'm going to turn one right side out, ta-da, and I'm going to slip it inside the other one, so then my right sides are together. And I'm going to join the crotch seam, so those matches, we'll join them and I'll sew that together. So there we have one crotch seam, and I've gone back as the book says and I've reinforced the centre crotch there with a second row of stitches. I made them a slightly wider zigzag to go over the top. So next step in the book is to put interfacing over the back on the waistband for the buttonholes. Now I've decided I don't want a band. I'm going to sew 2 pieces of elastic together to create a thicker piece, because it's lockdown and I've not been able to get the woolly wide. So I'm going to create a thicker piece of elastic, and I'm just going to use that, and I don't want the ties, so I'm going to skip those steps. So I'm going to work on my waistband now. So I'll put this to one side. Then to reduce bulk, I'm going to just trim the seam allowances. Finger press that open, and I'm going to start turning it, folding it in half, this time wrong sides together, so my right sides are out. So there is my waistband all clipped together and folded in half. So now I need to bring back my leg pieces. So I can take one leg out from inside the other now. And I turn them right sides out. So I'm going to slip the waistband over the top. So if you had buttonholes on this, the buttonhole side would line up with the front of your trousers there. So then when you fold it up, the right side with the buttonholes would be out. Because I'm not using buttonholes, I don't have that. I don't have to worry about that so much. So I'm going to pin my waistband all the way round. I've lined up my centre, the centre of the waistband with my centre back seam to make sure that's the back of my trousers. And I'm going to sew them together, and I'm going to make sure I'm going to leave a gap at the back. So the pattern recommends 10 centimetres, and this will allow me to insert my elastic in a minute. So I'm going to get on with pinning and sewing. Okay, so I have pinned and sewn my waistband to my trousers. I've also sewn those two pieces of elastic together to create a thick band, and I've already inserted it into my waistband, sealed it up. So what I'm going to do that's not in the instructions is I'm going to top stitch my band down, because obviously it's a lot thinner than the waistband channel. So I've positioned it in the middle and I've pinned it across. What I'm going to do out is with a straight stitch, I'm going to do 2 top stitching stitches across the elastic. So I have to make sure when I put it on the machine, I stretch both the elastic and the material out flat, and that will give me my top stitching. So I'm going to do that now. Last bit on these now is the cuffs at the bottom. So I've got 2 cuffs here. What we'll need to do is, same as the waistband, sew the short ends together, fold them in half, put them over the bottom of the trousers, stitch them up, and then pull them too. And that's how we do a cuff band. So we'll get on and do that one now. there we have 2 cuffs attached. I've trimmed the seam allowances. When I turn them out, they are all sewn on, and that is the last step. So we'll put them on and we'll have a look at our final Stella Joggers.